let me tell you about an X-Men L. One bigger than the one Professor X took in Multiverse of Madness, a bigger L than the fact that we'll probably never see Daphne Keane as X-23 again, an L arguably bigger than just Dark Phoenix as a whole. Let me tell you the tragedy of Wolverine and the X-Men. It's not a story Marvel Studios would tell you. And don't worry, we're not really going to get into spoiler territory here. Wolverine and the X-Men, or WaTXM for short, was an animated project which ran for one season and one season alone back in 2009. It centered on the X-Men, obviously, but with a few twists. For one, Professor X and Jean Grey are out. They're here, they fulfill story functions, but they're not exactly on the team. No, this time around, we've got Emma Frost, we've got Forge, we've got Cyclops, but he's not exactly the Cyclops we're familiar with. No, he's kind of a mess.
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
And as the name might suggest, we've got Wolverine leading the team. But in some ways, the show's behind-the-scenes team is just as interesting as its main cast. The show was developed primarily by Greg Johnson and Craig Kyle, the minds behind a lot of these 2000s-era Marvel animated projects, and these guys were no stranger to the X-Men, having worked on Evolution a few years prior. Also involved, even more so toward the tail end of the season, were a creative duo we've talked about a few times before on this channel, Josh Fine and Chris Yost. Wolverine and the X-Men was the bedrock of their project to build a new Marvel animated universe, which has been dubbed the Yostverse in retrospect, and yeah, we've talked about this plenty before, so I won't dwell on it here, but it is neat to think when we see characters like Hulk and Fury show up, we're getting a glimpse into what was, at one point, going to be a massive interconnected universe. To say the team behind this show were familiar with these characters, this setting, would be an understatement. This wasn't their first X rodeo, which makes it even more admirable that they chose a different route. You see, there's sort of a default setting that most X-Men adaptations and reboots have tended toward in the past few decades, in TV and in film. That is, we're in a school, the Xavier Institute, on the edge of town, for which the X-Men function as teachers or custodians, while also going out on mission, clashing against Magneto, the Brotherhood, Apocalypse, and so on, while generally trying to keep out of the spotlight. Now, obviously there's a great deal of comic book precedent for this basic setup, and it can lead to some great stories, but as time goes by, as we see this again and again, it gets stale. But this show recognized that. This show opens with the story hook which sees Xavier and the X-Mansion blown up, and in a sense, this shows Wolverine and the X-Men detonating this status quo. That's a gutsy move. And yeah, the rest of the show follows through. This show kinda does things differently. The aesthetics, cast, and tone all skew a lot closer to the 2000s era New X-Men and Astonishing X-Men stories than most X adaptations do. Considering the timeline of this show's development, that'd be like if the MCU put out an X-Men film today, which passed over all the classic stuff, the Claremont stuff, and drew mostly from the recent Hickman run. In addition, Wolverine and the X-Men was committed to a degree of serialization right from the start, which was rare in the show's predecessors. I've talked before about how Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes, which we could consider a sister show of sorts to this one, balanced long-form plotting with an episodic structure, and a lot of those points could apply just as well here. And towards the end of the season, all the setup comes together beautifully. And then, of course, there's the move to put Logan in the driver's seat. Now, the decision to do this was corporate, presumably to tie the series in with the Hugh Jackman-led Fox films. Studio bigwigs told the show's developers to tell a Wolverine-centric story. But the way Kyle, Johnson, and co took this corporate directive and turned it into creativity is remarkable. They realized that without decades of comic book build-up, the only way Logan would take over leadership duties would be if Charles was taken out of the picture, temporarily at least, and that one of the best motivators for his continued leadership would be an effort to find Charles and bring him back. So the season revolves around Logan as a reluctant leader type, trying to save a time-displaced Xavier, who's awoken in a dark, dark future. That's a pretty unique premise to base a superhero cartoon around, especially one rebooting a franchise whose previous adaptations had rarely been so plot-driven. You might be thinking, alright, cool I guess, different vibe, different characters, and a different focus. Fine, what's the big deal? And that's fair. That is more or less where the show stands now. Some changes to the formula, some cool new ideas, nothing major. Nothing big enough to stick, really. But that's because it got one season. And in one season, the potential of Wolverine and the X-Men was there, but never realized. because that almost time travel angle wasn't a one-off. No, it was going to be the core of this show, because the pitch for the second season was Wolverine and the X-Men managed to stop this horrible Days of Future Past-esque timeline which Charles had been trapped in all season long, but in doing so, they accidentally caused an even worse one. Now it's Age of Apocalypse. And again, they've got to reverse engineer the future and figure out how to stop it in the present. This isn't just speculation. The first season ended teasing this direction, and the first few scripts for season 2 leaked. You can read them. This was the plan. We've even heard recently from Josh Fine that the few discussions the team had back in the day around a potential third season outline featured yet another alternate future, and that one inspired by House of M was on the table. So move over, Loki, because you're not actually the first piece of timeline hopping Marvel television after all. Of course, that doesn't come through so strongly with just the one season. You can't spot a pattern if the sample size is 1. But if we had seen more, then people would have realized Wolverine and the X-Men wasn't just another X-Men show. It was an X-Men show about something, taking this familiar cast and not just exploring the same contours of the setting, the same story directions that other writers had explored in this medium before, but using these familiar starting points to do something new. And that's awesome. This isn't X-Men cartoon number 3, it's X-Men versus the time stream. And that shows a creative mindset we really need. I don't know if any of you guys have noticed the sense of cultural deja vu recently, but over the past few years, the landscape of pop culture has shifted, placing an ever greater focus on familiarity. Reboots, revivals, and adaptations are the norm nowadays. If you were to describe this phenomenon uncharitably, you might well call it post-modernity in decay, a rotten hellscape of recycled properties and canned nostalgia, an artificial weighted blanket of corporate cowardice stifling creativity, the death knell of the new. I don't know that I'd be quite so negative, but if someone said that to me, I'd be forced to admit that there is clearly some truth there. And maybe the re-adaptation of the X-Men for yet another cartoon, that third to be on the air in a decade or so, contributed to this landscape, but this show was always going to get made. A new X-Men cartoon was always going to air back in 2009. That was out of the control of the show's runners and writers. It wasn't a given, though, that this show would be as fresh as Wolverine and the X-Men ended up being, that it wouldn't be content to just be another X-Men cartoon, that it would use these second-hand parts to iterate upon the formula. If ours is an era of reboots, of unoriginality, then I think the fact that the team behind Wolverine and the X-Men managed to cobble together some newness from all this corporate recycling is worth admiring, and it's tantalizing to imagine just how much new ground this show could have covered, what it could have grown into if it had been able to fully dive into its time displacement premise across another few seasons. That should have been on the cards here. The season premiere did numbers, but it wasn't meant to be. Way back in 2008, a second season was confirmed to be in production. Images from season 2 were shared at Comic-Con a year later, showing us new characters like Deadpool, Colossus, Jubilee, Magic, and more. But then things went quiet. And on the 15th of April 2010, Marvel confirmed that Wolverine and the X-Men would not be returning. Why did this happen? Well, we don't know the details, but it seems like it was due to financing issues ultimately arising from Disney's purchase of Marvel. And nowadays, the show's all but forgotten. You can't even view it on Disney+, at least here in the UK, and it seems like the brass up at Marvel HQ have completely memory-holed the project. But as always, the fans remember. So that's the tragedy of Wolverine and the X-Men. A show cut down through no fault of its own, just as it was starting to reveal that it wasn't just another X-Men cartoon. And think about the aftermath, not counting the anime, cause that's kind of its own thing. The only X-Men animation to be made since this cancellation is the upcoming X-Men 97, a continuation of a 30-year-old show. One wonders if all hope of breaking new ground with X-Men adaptations died with Wolverine and the X-Men 12 years ago. Or maybe it didn't. Maybe the MCU's take on everyone's favorite mutants will chart a bold new course. But either way, the loss of this show, before it even got to show what it really could be, that's truly a shame. Thanks for watching. If you want to hear more about this show, particularly from a behind-the-scenes perspective, I've linked below an interview Josh Fine did with YouTuber Chainsaw Reacts. And a few of my old Yostverse videos have been hitting the algorithm recently, so just in case this one does too, either now now or in like a year's time, I'll just mention that there is a fan campaign to revive these shows. Joining in is very easy. Just follow this Twitter account and keep an eye out for what it says about upcoming trend events and so forth. And as always, I'd like to thank my patrons on screen now. There's a lot of new names here, some of whom joined up following the recent Patreon restructure, and I'm grateful to every one of you, especially Kevin Douglas and Ian Fifield. But oh no, I'm stuck in an alternate future timeline, and you can only stop it happening if you like and share this video. Please save me, please, I beg. Alright, yeah, bye.